Lovely. So, first of all, I'd like to give a big hand of applause for every presenter who's come up. So everybody, please, big round of applause for everybody who's come up. It helps build and strengthen our ecosystem here. And first and foremost, I want to say welcome to all of the founders, leaders, and fearless pathfinders in the room. My name is Alberto, and this morning I will be your dungeon master. When we're talking about this, for today's session, we will be talking about how to turn a solo adventure into a full campaign. And every journey, every great story comes with unforgettable locations. So we will, of course, start things off at our solo run. We will then go and meet our very first party. And with our first party, we will fight off the clone army before we awaken as dungeon masters, where we now have the power and skills to create customized homebrew systems and tools to help turn our solo run adventure into a legendary full campaign. And yes, during today's session, there is going to be story time weaved into the presentation. So I'll be telling you a little bit about how we at GiveKit have transformed ourselves from a solo run to a full campaign. And so with that said and done, let's get started with the solo run. At this point in your story, you have an amazing idea. You have a great vision. And so you start building, you start writing code, you start writing a story, and you begin to see that there's a mountain of obstacles, a mountains of challenges that you begin to face. These come into a way of you are the hero of the story. In the solo run, you are the sole hero. You are doing everything to make your vision a success. You begin to prioritize speed over process. You begin to try to fall into that thinking where if I don't do it, nobody's gonna do it. And during your solo run, when you're running through it, you begin to realize and learn the truth of a hero. Every hero has to learn how to delegate small tasks. We need to be able to build repeatable processes so that when new heroes come to the story, to the adventure, that they can perform at the level we need them to perform. And then, of course, we learn the dark truth of a hero. Heroes do not scale. At this moment, we begin to understand that we simply cannot do it alone. So what do? We begin to invite other people to the table. Our friends, our family, our colleagues, whoever is willing and able to roll the dice with us, we bring them to the table. Now, your first party will be chaotic, to say the least. You're gonna come with challenges and obstacles of their own. Your first party, you will encounter your reluctant heroes. You shall encounter and find undefined roles, and you'll begin to see decisions start to slow down. Now, what do I mean when I say reluctant heroes? These are the individuals who are at the table. Now, regardless if it's a startup or a Dungeons & Dragons game, you will find that there are people at that table who are rolling the dice every night, not because they want to, but because they were told to be there. These unreluctant heroes will create tension, strife, and ultimately prevent growth. So it is important that we have that difficult conversation when we find ourselves face to face with reluctant heroes. Now, among them, we talk about undefined roles. Now, I'm gonna take you through some story time here, because when I first came to GiveKit, my role was not fully fleshed out. My responsibilities, my expectations, my duties, they were absolutely not laid out in concrete or in stone. So we often had times where I would say, okay, I'm gonna create this marketing graphic, I'm gonna create this video, I'm gonna do this demo, I'm gonna talk to this organization. And with undefined roles, you find that you begin to step on people's toes. You start crossing lines that you're not supposed to be in. And it does happen, especially in those early stages when you're in your first party. And so when those undefined roles come up, you also begin to see that your meetings become to lengthen out. They're never ending. You're talking about how things should be, how we should plan things, how we should build, and not a lot of action happens. This is why it's important to understand with our chaotic first party that we need to align incentives, that when we find those reluctant heroes, that we have those difficult conversations. Everybody at the table needs to have that same drive. They want to be there. They shouldn't have to be forced to be there every night. They shouldn't have to be forced to roll their dice. No, they should want to be there. Now, it is important that with our first party, we begin to define and set clear roles. Whether that person is your mom, your brother, your nephew, your cousin, your best friend, whoever that individual might be. And it might be a difficult conversation, but you need to set those defined roles, because then we are able to communicate clearly our expectations of every hero at the table. And those expectations can be small. They can be as simple as, hey, every week, every one of our social media posts needs to have these many graphics, or every one of our videos needs to be this long, or by the end of the month, we should have spoken to these many customers. Those small, trackable, and measurable goals, expectations, help the first party get some real structure. And now that we have our friends and they're cooperating, all of our heroes are at the table and they're rolling the dice with us, we begin to realize quickly that every single person at the table needs to play the game differently. Because suddenly, everyone at the table starts thinking exactly the way you do. You begin to see that clone army start to rise. Everyone's thinking the same way, and so your blind spots begin to multiply and trickle down into your teams, to the rest of the party members, to the rest of your heroes, and things begin to get missed. Now, when things are missed, it is very common for tensions to rise and for there to be friction, and energy becomes misaligned. And this is where that's when a difficult truth comes to mind, and a lesson. No, you cannot all be the bard. We need to make sure that every hero at the table have their class. Every hero class has its purpose. We can have a wizard who can see 5, 6 steps ahead. We need a paladin who can make sure that every single one of our customers, our clients, that they feel safe, they feel guarded, and that they feel seen. And we also need a bard who can go to every single networking event and shake every hand, smile, do the dance, and be successful in that. And ultimately, when we're defining these classes for our heroes, it's important that we let the party roles decide which person plays that class. Because we will have individuals at the table who have certain affinity for certain areas of skills. So we'll have a wizard who can create systems and tools, but they can't explain it to our clients. We have a person who has really a good talent for creating marketing graphics, but they're extremely camera shy. We need to make sure that these skills, that these traits fall in and play out for our heroes so that they can grow into their classes. Now, this is something that I always tell anybody, especially in the startup world. When you're doing this campaign, you will come across wild cards. These are things or people at the very last hour, at the 11th hour of the night, they come to you and they say, I have this idea. You talk it out, and by the next morning, you're ready to run with it. When you're in startup land, it is important that when you come across these wild card moments, that you celebrate them, that you embrace them. Do not shy away from risk, because creating a campaign, creating a story, creating a company comes with risk. So when you have these moments, do not shy away from it, because greatness can happen with just a little bit of luck and just a little roll of that dice. So when those wild cards come, embrace them. Now, we begin to see that there's synergy, there's teamwork, there's a lot of really good energy at the table, and the problem is no longer the players. The problem begins to come and show its face as it's the way the game is being run. The systems, the rules, they're just not quite balanced. And so this is when we begin to awaken as dungeon masters. And as an early firstborn dungeon master, you will of course develop some really bad habits, including railroading. Now, for those who haven't played yet, railroading is a term we use in Dungeons and Dragons when we're telling a story as a dungeon master, and then suddenly the wizard says, hey, you know what? I want to go to the wizarding school. And then the dungeon master says, nope, we're going this direction. So it's essentially just micromanagement. And when we when we start off as a dungeon master, this is one of the first bad habits we develop. And it's important that when we are awakening ourselves as a dungeon master, that we don't fall into, or we let go of that railroad. Because the harder we hold on to that railroad, to that vision of what we think things should be like, the more we fade into dissonant whispers. When things go wrong, when things don't go quite exactly the way we plan, we begin to overreact. We begin to kind of fear failure. And ultimately, brings me to my next point. Every campaign, every story comes with critical failures, where you roll the dice and you get a natural one, meaning that where everything could have gone wrong, goes wrong. And so when these moments come up, do not fear it, and do not fall into that area of like, oh, it has to be this way. And to give you a good example, one of our first early critical fails at GiveKit was we started the company thinking that we absolutely needed to raise money, that we needed to chase investment, we needed to find just $100,000. If we could raise $100,000, we can build a successful company. And so every time we reached out to an investment firm or an investor or a VC, whenever we talked to them, we got a no, it was very demotivating. It was crucial to us. It was crushing. And eventually, we came to our team, and when we let go of that rail, we stopped forcing them to build things that we thought were going to make us attractive to investors. We began to grow in ways we didn't expect. We started seeing new features come to our platform based on what our partners wanted, what our nonprofits wanted. We began to see more clients, more relationships, more partnerships start to come in. And just like that, we no longer were chasing investment. We were fully bootstrapped. There was no need for investment. We don't look for it. And ultimately now, it's fully operational and it's fully running. And we're super proud of that. And that would have never happened if we never let go of that rail, which is important when you first awaken as a dungeon master, that you trust the party. Trust your heroes, because from day-to-day operations, your heroes are responsible for reacting to it all. Yours is to prepare. Your heroes will fight that dragon. Your heroes will slay the kraken. It is your responsibility at this point to prepare the outcome. You're not solving everyday problems. You're not solving everyday flags. You are designing the outcomes. You are writing the story beats. What's going to happen 3 months from now? What's going to happen 6 months from now, a year from now? That becomes your new role as a dungeon master. And so now that we stopped reacting to the chaos, we stopped trying to quell it, silence it, and we're now managing the chaos, we begin to build and create something bigger. We start to design the world. We start to design custom tools, custom systems. We began to homebrew our very own line of systems to help transform our heroes into legends. Now, when you are creating your homebrew systems and tools, you will of course have heated debates. You will have conversations about which tool is better, which system is better. You're gonna hear, is 5E better than 4E? And those conversations will go on and they will get heated. And it's important that when we come to those points, that we listen and that we do not react. We will have discussions on everything. And when we install and implement new tools and systems, there will always be a flaw. There will always be friction points. And it is important that when we get to that we don't fall into the thinking of time heals all wounds. No, do not let time try to smoothen things out, because that never works out. If there is friction, if there is tension between hero to hero or hero to dungeon master, they will only be festering if left unchecked. So make sure that when you are implementing new tools and systems, that if tension arises, make sure that you address them professionally and of course sincerely, because by doing so, you begin to identify, adapt, and change. And that is what we want to turn into next. It's min-maxing. Min-maxing is a term we use in Dungeons & Dragons, where we see a hero or a person put all and invest all of their time into a particular skill, and they become weaker in other areas. This is very common both in the game and in real life. In the game, your team might be fighting a dragon. The dragon's flying 40 feet in the air, and your wizard has 20 different things that they can do. But your fighter, they only got their sword and their shield. How are they gonna reach that dragon? So your tools and system, as you're implementing them, need to create synergy so that the wizard during this encounter says, you know what, I'm gonna cast fly on the fighter, and the fighter can now meet that dragon in its own terrain and come out with a more epic, a more memorable outcome. And it's that kind of synergy that we need to be able to see amongst our heroes in real life. And to kind of give a good example of us here at Give Kit, one of our heroes, Sandy, she came up to me one day and said, Alberto, honestly, at the table, I don't feel the most comfortable. Everybody else is in different eras. I'm not getting the references, I'm not getting the jokes. I'm kind of like feeling left out. I don't think I belong here. And it was a critical moment for Sandy because Sandy helped structure our messaging to our day-to-day clientele. And so, yes, Sandy, we helped her identify and see her true worth at our table. Sandy definitely doesn't come from the same era. Not everyone at the table is in their 20s and their 30s. They're all from different eras. And so by helping Sandy see that her value is how she communicates, how she connects with our target demographics, she understood that she is invaluable, she's irreplaceable, and she belongs at our table. And by helping Sandy shine, she's now fully committed and still writing for us, making sure that we're connecting to our demographics. And this would have never happened if we didn't have systems in place to help our heroes see their shine, see their worth, and become legends. Now, when we are homebrewing our custom systems and rules, that rules and systems make the game playable. And this is, like I mentioned, where we want to make sure that we are weighing in on the tools and services and features and systems that we implement. Which is worth the resource? Do we cast message or do we cast sending? Do we invest in Slack or do we invest in Discord? Those are kind of the conversations that you will have and you need to be open to. Now, by implementing systems and tools, you begin to see improved cooldowns. Your heroes are not burning out as quickly and they can fight and do the encounters longer than before. And it is important that when you are implementing or discovering these new tools, that you do not let perfection get in the way of greatness. As mentioned, every new tool, every new system comes with their own flaws. It is important that when these new tools and systems are implemented, that we identify, acknowledge any friction points, that we address them, and that we grow and change the system. Now that we've seen these tools and systems that finally fit our party of heroes, you begin to see that the story starts to be told without you. Your heroes have now become legends. They're no longer people just rolling dice, they are legends in their field. You have built a campaign. The party has true sight. They can see obstacles, challenges, pitfalls, opportunities months away in advance. The wizard goes off into a side quest and he comes back with a bunch of new features, new tools for the platform. Your bard goes to a networking event on their own and they come back with a bunch of new cool corporate partnerships for the company. And these story beats are really important for the campaign. When that culture begins to thrive, even when nobody is at the table, meaning that your heroes, the people who are on your team, are talking about what you are building, even if there's nobody else in the room, when they're thinking, when they're obsessed on what things they want to do, what they want to bring to the table, that is how you know that your culture is thriving, healthy, and that overall the story will continue. You have built a full campaign. You're no longer doing anything alone. Everybody at the table is there with you, they're invested, and you're all heroes of the story. So this weekend, I want to challenge everybody in the room to just think about where you are in your story. Are you in that solo run era? Have you met your first party? Are you fighting the clone army? Have you awakened as a dungeon master? Are you holding on to that rail a little too hard? Or are you starting to create your custom rules and systems for your party to evolve? Are you at that final full campaign? Do you have a full story in your hands? I want to thank everybody here for letting me be your dungeon master. And the only ask that I have is please say thank you, scan my QR code, give me some feedback on how we did today. And of course, I'd love to open things up for questions. Thank you. Absolutely. So how many people do you need on your team to go from the first step to the next? Honestly, it depends on the overall thing that you're trying to build. Your story has requirements of how many heroes, but what I like to tell individuals is your first party can be composed of 5 people, 20 people, and as the story progresses, you're gonna find, like I mentioned, those unreluctant heroes. You're gonna find individuals who maybe are not endgame. They're gonna be there for a couple of seasons, they're gonna be there for a couple of sessions, and then they're gonna need and or want to walk away. Even though the party may shrink, the vision, the mission will always be there because there are people invested in what you are trying to do. Thank you. Of course. All right. Well, thank you, everybody.